It's okay to be more successful than the people that raised you. It's okay to have an easier life. It's okay to not have to struggle. The work that you do on yourself is the most brave, beautiful thing that you could ever do, because every single belief that you have, you will pass on. I always say it's like 7 generations previous and 7 generations ahead, you are directly impacting. So don't be afraid of what's living underneath the surface. Hello and welcome. We are here today with Brigitte Arnett, and Brigitte is probably one of my most favorite humans on the planet. She is a nervous system specialist and one of my co-coaches, and helps support our students in being able to rewire their unconscious, being able to expand their nervous systems to hold massive wealth. We're actually going to be having a really beautiful discussion about money, about wealth expansion, and how we can get more really expansive wealth into the hands of really good-hearted, really empowered humans, so that we can change communities, heal communities, and hopefully change the world. Hi, Brigitte.
Hello, thank you for having me.
I'm so happy you're here. I really wanted to start the conversation specifically around what is something that you believed around money growing up that you no longer believe today.
I feel like for a long time I held a belief that it was maybe bad or wrong for people to have a lot of wealth, or not so much that it was bad or wrong, but more that the people who had that level of wealth maybe didn't have good morals or good values. They were kind of corrupted by it, sort of that concept. And that is something that I absolutely no longer resonates in any way, shape, or form. Like, I'm like, whoa, that is silly. That that just seems silly to me now. And I think it's so beautiful, because now I feel that the more well-resourced you are, those resources are just going to give you more opportunities to be a good person on the outside. And it's just going to magnify and reflect who you are on the inside and give you the tools and the abilities to bring that outward into the world.
So we know, obviously, with working with thousands of people, the actual interesting thing about beliefs is they don't really show up as beliefs. We don't really walk through the world and feel like, this is what I believe about money and this is how I show up. It actually shows up behaviorally, right? And I'd love to know from you, what are some of the behaviors that you had or were aware of now looking back that were kind of showing up that were actually keeping you from really expanding or holding more?
I definitely had a lot of unconscious spending. This is something that comes up a lot. Is I've always had an ease of inflow starting from a very young age. I started working at 15, 16, and it was just like, woo, it just came in. It always flowed, and it would flow out just as easily as it flowed in. So I would sort of end up at this set point. And a lot of that is unconscious. You don't realize you're doing it. It's kind of this excitement of, oh, it's coming in, and then it's just whoosh, washing right out. On one hand, it's important to be able to circulate in a conscious way, in a self-aware way, where you're really being intentional with the way that you're releasing or that you're spending or circulating your resources. And I think for a long time, it didn't accumulate in any way, because I would spend as big as I manifested. And that's something that more recently, I'd say within the last few years, last year especially, it's landed on like a physical embodied level, where I finally feel like I had these energetic holes, like these leaky holes, if I had a resource bucket, and they were just sort of pouring out in all these different ways. And I really feel like I've landed in this place where all those holes are plugged up, and I'm very conscious, I'm very aware with any sort of outflow or spending, and it's accumulating in this really beautiful way, and it feels really good.
I'm really curious too, because this is something that so many people navigate, is this kind of unconscious wealth container. And that's what we support our clients with, is expanding that wealth container so that they actually can receive more, because there is an absolute tie between receivership of like, hey, there's not an issue with me making the money. The money's great. Like it comes right in, right? But I don't feel safe with it. It's like burning a hole in my pocket. Like I need to get rid of it. And I think that it's really, really interesting that, first off, that we can change and that we can grow and we can become aware of these things. But I'd really love to know from your perspective is, if somebody has has kind of this idea of like, I really do feel uncomfortable with money in general, even though I consciously desire more. I consciously want more for my life. And in a really good hearted way, like if I had overflow, I would inherently retire my parents, or I would do more things and I would help more people. But I actually feel physically uncomfortable with the idea of asking or receiving more and inherently holding more of that, whether that be perceived responsibility or that it'll make me something different. What do you feel would be the first step for somebody to really even understand where they stand with money? Like, what would be some of the questions that you would have them ask themselves?
Yeah, I love that. And kind of bringing it back to your point earlier about the behaviors, I think sometimes that's the easiest way to sort of spotlight where it's showing up is noticing these behaviors. So bringing the awareness into the conversation where you're like, wow, I noticed that I go to Target when I'm bored and this money just flows out into all these things that I might not really need, right? And I think that's a pretty universal experience. And just starting to become aware, inviting in the awareness day by day, piece by piece, especially around this money conversation, and notice where there's physical tension. A lot of times the body is going to communicate that to you in a way that most people are not paying attention to, they're not noticing. And notice, oh, I just received this X amount. How does it feel in my body? What am I going unconscious? Am I kind of slipping into this sort of numbing state where next thing you know, you're spending just as much as you just came in? Or are you able to take a step back and notice the sensations, the physical sensations, the patterns, the ways that these blocks are showing up? And a lot of times it's emotions. You might have some emotions that come up, some discomfort. You might not really understand at first where it's coming from. A good example I use for this is in the tipping industry. We both come from the hair world. And I used to work with a girl who, every time one of her clients would try to tip her, she would just run away. Like she would evaporate and she'd be like, I'm out of here. It was just so fascinating to me because that's a perfect example of a behavior that shows up when you're like blocking. And I see that a lot. I see it more often than the other way, right? Where you're ready and willing to receive with gratitude and appreciation. Those types of things, just inviting in the awareness and the noticing of, oh, I do that. And that is interesting. And the other bit I'll say to that is always approaching these types of things, an inventory, if you will, a self-inventory with the energy of curiosity. We don't want to enter into self-awareness with judgment or criticism or, oh, I'm broken and I need to be fixed. Those are going to create a stress response in the nervous system and make it harder to suss out the truth. And what we want to do is really enter in with this energy of curiosity. Like, oh, isn't this interesting? It's so interesting to figure out what makes me tick, or, to look into these subconscious realms and figure out these programs that we all operate from. So I think those two things, that's where you would start, just opening that dialogue, that conversation, and that noticing. And that alone is enough to shift things, that loving awareness.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because the nervous system can't tell time. So anytime that you feel this restriction or anytime that you feel these things, just know that that's information, and that it's honestly, I think, such beautiful information that our bodies can communicate with us and say, hey, this is actually where tension is, and this is where restriction is, and this is, that you can work together to be able to understand yourself even more deeply, because the majority of people won't do this work because there's perceived discomfort. But when you approach it, I love when you say approach it with curiosity, because there's a softening there. There's an allowance of like, hey, it's okay that I experience these things. There's just like this radical kind of like self-acceptance and self-compassion throughout the process of that curiosity, so that you can make change, and you can't make change without a general state of awareness. So I love when you're like, okay, like just go throughout the day. Like, what are some of those things? And some things that I talk about too is how you kind of show up with either your bank account, or how you feel when you have it, or if you avoid your bank account, or if there's these kind of just behaviors are just information that help you understand a little bit more deeply. Another thing that I really, really want to talk about, because I find that this is one of those things that when it was happening to me, it was so interesting, is sometimes that we have people that enter into our lives and they see something in us that we would have never seen in ourselves. They bring the light out in us, right? And the first person that really, really did that for me was my husband, Nick. And he always believed in me, and he always saw the light in me and always trusted me and always said, like, you can do it no matter what, just you can do it. I believe in you. You're great. Even when I truly didn't know if that was the case, if I didn't even really truly believe that. But I'll never forget the story of when I met the first millionaire in my life. She was so smart and just electric, and her energy was beautiful. At the time, I was in the hair world and I had my own company and all of these things. And I remember her coming up to me and she was just like, you could be a millionaire. And I felt physical, my whole body was like, ugh. Honestly, I said out loud, ooh. She goes, wait, why are you responding that way? What's coming up for you? And I just said, like, that's not who I am. No, no. And I was so intrigued by that response because it was the first time it had ever happened. And it was the first time that I was truly aware of this rejection in my body. Even though I had a very, very successful company at the time, the idea of being a millionaire, even the word millionaire, brought up this rejection in my body of like, oh no, that's not who I am. And it was that first moment of like, oh shit, I think there's some work to be done here. What's happening? What is this? I was just not aware of the subconscious mind or my nervous system or anything to do with, money stories or anything. And so I really think it's so interesting when you can dive into your story for the first time, when you actually decide, oh my God, I can change. Because there was most of my life, I didn't even know I could. I spent most of my life broke and suffering and feeling uncomfortable around money and really remaining small, but it was just my familiar zone. And I was running off of someone else's program. The way that I was raised and the way that I was taught around money, societal expectations around money. And it wasn't until I was like, oh, I want to know what this is. And I dove into the unconscious and I was like, what? These have been hanging around in my body this whole time. Like, no shit, I feel this way. No wonder like money makes me feel uncomfortable, or receiving a bigger tip made me feel uncomfortable, that I felt like I needed to spend my money, or that my bank account always looked the same no matter how much I worked. Like, it was insane realizations. I think that there's something really beautiful that comes with diving into the unknown and getting to learn a little bit more about yourself and walking into the state of this authorship of your life. I'd be like, wow. If I can actually rewrite these stories and actually understand if they're mine to even carry, like what my life can be, like how I can feel, because it's really beautiful to think about how much change can happen. I'm curious to know from you if there was one specific belief or behavior that once you became aware of it, you were like, okay, that's not my story. Like, that's not something I want to hold on to. And by releasing it, it made a positive impact in your life.
Yeah, for sure. There's so many, but what's coming to mind is the green beans. Remember when I told you about this? I was at the grocery store and I had noticed through the curiosity, through the awareness, I had noticed this pattern of scarcity that would show up in my body in the grocery store. Side note, I love that you brought up that the sensation was in your body. My understanding is that the body is going to communicate what's going on in the subconscious mind, where the mind is really a lot more of the conscious mind. So you can have the conscious desire to, oh, I want to have more resources. I want to call this in. At the same time, your body is feeling really uncomfortable with that. So that's a really important thing to notice. So I was, scanning the grocery store, and inflation has been doing its thing, and the green beans were so expensive for some reason. And I remember being like, well, I am not paying, $6 for green beans. And I had this whole thing about it. And I was like, girl, like, you have $6? Like, what is this? Right? Like, I had the resources. I certainly had enough money for groceries. I just suddenly became very cognizant of the fact that it was a scarcity program that was likely not my own, because I've always had resources for groceries, at least, thankfully, very grateful for that. And it just dropped in like a little lightning bolt. Like, I was like, what are we doing here? Are we still going to do this forever? Are we going to stress about every little thing, right? And I would always play this game where it's like, I have to find the cheapest grocery price and I have to drive to the other side of the town because it's 50 cents cheaper here. And it was just something that dropped in, and I said, I don't like this anymore. This isn't a part of my most wealth conscious version of myself. And we actually talked about it, and you were like, I want you to write this down. Remember this moment where you were going to change this belief around the green beans. And I sure did. And then after that, it became a deeper conversation of worthiness around nourishment and high quality nourishment. I really am someone who appreciates a high quality food, and that tends to be a little bit more of an investment. And that sort of shifted that whole conversation where now it's like my body deserves to be nourished by high quality nourishment. And I don't even really think about the dollars or, I don't play those games anymore. I kind of opted out of that whole conversation. I think it came from a good place. I think these programs, they usually are coming from a place of safety and security and wanting to be intelligent and be mindful and respectful of your resources. It's a fine line between being mindful and operating on a scarcity program.
There's something that you actually talked about with our clients before, which was, I'll never forget the story, it was the micro-scarcity that pops up with like the toothpaste story. It's like when you get to a point when you feel like you need to cut the end of the toothpaste, like just just go ahead to the store and buy more toothpaste. It's okay. It's all right. And it's really interesting because these micro scarcities really truly do show up. And it's a really beautiful way of just becoming aware of that. If there was something that you could share around your current belief of money, what would that be?
Something I love so much about the work that we do is watching the light bulb click on for people. You never know what's going to land. And sometimes you step out there and you're talking, you're sharing with so many people and you don't know what's going to land, but you can see it. You can see that spark. You can see that awareness. It's so exciting because once it lands, that wealth accumulation, wealth manifestation, calling in resources, that is just going to amplify the person that you already are inside. And the people that you bring into our world, the people who are magnetized to our world are just fucking awesome. They're awesome people. Like they are the coolest people. They're very heart-centered. They have big dreams, big passions, big goals. And to me, there's just nothing more exciting than having limitless resources in the hands of people who are doing beautiful things in this world. In a lot of ways, there's sort of this programming around people with big hearts doing big, beautiful things. They tend to not have as many resources. And that's something I'd like to see just flipped right on its head, where imagine what you can do in this world. Imagine what you can do for your family, for your loved ones, for your community, and yourself. Like you deserve it. You don't even have to, immediately think to doing something for others. Like you deserve, every single one of us deserves to have our needs met, to be well-resourced, to be able to live a life that just feels really freaking good. And we live in a 3D world in which money is the exchange for a lot of those resources. When you neutralize it, you look at it and it's like, it's an exchange, right? That's it. It's an energy exchange. It's a physical exchange. Kind of neutralize that charge and then look at it like, what could I do? What could I do in this world if I had abundant resources? And watching that light bulb click on for people is just, and we have some people who've been in our world for years at this point, and just watching from A to Z or wherever, it's the coolest thing. It's so cool.
It's really beautiful. And I think that there's specific things that I really want to touch on. A lot of beliefs come up around wealth accumulation and what it means to be a person that is well resourced. And a large amount of people, when they kind of are either introduced to our world, they're like, okay, no, like I just need enough to get by. It's like, but what would you do if you had overflow? What good would you do? What else would you be able to do? Right? A lot of the times, another belief that comes up is when you are somebody that ends up having more, you become bad. I will always say that money is only an amplifier of what it's currently existing within your value system. So if you are somebody who, even when you don't have a lot of resources, will generally donate your time, you'll want to help more people, you'll be the one that's kind of rallying for people or showing up or doing your best with the abilities that you have or the resources that you have, just imagine that person in the hands of more wealth and what good they can do and how they can heal communities or feed families or create a really beautiful opportunity for more people to have incredible things. And I think that there's generally been people who have experienced somebody who has come into the hands of more resources and actually has now been perceived now as like they're showing up in these kind of negative ways, right? And I always say, you just didn't see that before because it doesn't change someone's value system. Having more wealth does not change somebody. It only amplifies what's currently existing within them. And you see this a lot when people come into a lot of resources like lottery winners. Like they'll either blow through it or their nervous system can't maintain that level of abundance and overflow. And then you see other ones that are insanely helpful and they're giving back and they're helping their families and they're helping their communities and they're giving back as often as they can. It's just really beautiful to know that whatever belief system you have can change. Whatever value system you have will be illuminated when you have more resources, and that it is your birthright to innately have a good life and to be able to feel more ease and to have more flow, and you don't need to suffer. And I just think that the work I think that we do is absolutely phenomenal and just so profound and really beautiful to be able to change the way that people have been raised to see things. You don't have to become someone different, to have those resources at all. Yeah, I just love the work that we do.
If anything, you watch people's real spark come online. If anything, you become more you, the you that you ideally would love to be, right? And you watch that come on when you step into this. Sometimes you just need someone to give you permission to step into this era of, I deserve to be happy. I deserve to have resources. I deserve to live in this dream life, right? It's like, yeah, yes, you do. And you give permission by being that, right? By being the light of what's possible. And I think this is something that you do really well, is like you really embody it. And then people see that and they're like, oh, well, she's doing it. That looks really cool. Maybe I'll try that on. And, you get some haters doing that, but it's worth it. And like we were just talking about earlier, that's their programming. That's their operating system, their programming. And sometimes this is just a really sticky conversation to have. But I love that we continuously show up and keep having the conversation, because the amount of light bulb moments and internal sparks that we get to witness with people who step into that worthiness and that deservingness, it's worth it. Jamie, I have a question for you. So you were a tremendous expander in my life. You came into my life at a time where I was really in some transitional places, and you showed me the light of what's possible, which is what you do for so many people. And I'm curious, someone who finds this, and this is maybe the first time that they are even having this conversation, and they're having light bulbs and they're having an awareness around their personal relationship with wealth and resource circulation. What would you tell someone who's just at the very beginning of this journey, the first spark of awareness like you were when you had your millionaire moment?
I love that question so much. I think first for me is the how is not part of the equation yet. I think a lot of times our logical brain is like, well, how can I make more money? How can I call that in? The thing that I want anyone who's listening to focus on is the call is always coming from inside the house. Wealth is an inside job. You don't have to figure out the logistic of how can I make more money. I really would love for anyone who's navigating this to know that resources are always available. Anytime you feel as though you're feeling called to the how, whether it be a strategy or something of that nature, you're out of alignment. Go right into the embodiment part of that and really work on being versus doing. I think so many people associate, I need to do more, I need to be more, I need to have more. If you could just focus on discovery right now more than anything else and learning about yourself, I think it's just have fun in the discovery phase. Just truly have fun, because that phase never ends. You're always going to be expanding. You're always going to be learning more about yourself, especially as you're expanding. And then lastly, it's okay to be more successful than the people that raised you. It's okay to have an easier life. It's okay to not have to struggle. It's okay to be perceived as different. And the work that you do on yourself is the most brave, beautiful thing that you could ever do. And it's not just ending with you, because every single belief that you have, you will pass on to the people around you, to the people that you raise, to the people that you give birth to the people that are in your stratosphere. And you will never realize what an impact you have on the people that are going to be coming after you, or the people that are in your world, when you truly come from such a grounded, healed space, when you know that the work that you've done is going to pass on. I always say it's like seven generations previous and 7 generations ahead you are directly impacting. So your ancestors are cheering you the fuck on right now. Clap, clap, snap, snap. But it's the most brave work that you could ever do. So don't be afraid of what's living underneath the surface.